Good morning, everyone. This is Jason Dean of Film Fanatic. Hope all the great and glorious YouTubers are up and at 'em and enjoying this kind of overcasty, rainy day. So, cheers. So, yeah, thanks everyone for checking out the videos. It's been really cool. One thing that I've been noticing that's been kind of cool and then also surprising with the YouTube channel is that I've been covering a lot of a ton of different exploitation horror movies that I've been really getting into. I'm trying to keep that the focus, mostly along the lines of like maybe some films that people have never seen before, and so it's been a ton of fun. But I've been noticing that some of the films that I've been doing videos on, they've been getting the most hits. The ones that are like kind of the more obscure ones. The there's a couple of movies that I did that are super underground films, and I was really surprised by the amount of views that those videos have been getting, and that's really awesome, and that's kind of really at the end of the day why I do this, why I do this show, and why I do this channel, and why I do anything related to film is, yeah, it's not really about me and the channel itself. Uh, Obviously, I want to, like everybody else, I want to try to get as much attention to a degree and try to build up the show. But at the end of the day, it's really about bringing some light to maybe certain films that if you dig horror films like I do, exploitation films like I do, you might come across something that is really cool and pretty obscure, and it might have influenced say a more commercial horror film, like say I don't know, you could take a film like say Halloween, or even to a degree like I did that series on Friday the 13th. Those movies are really iconic and very popular. So if you like those films, you want, like what I do a lot of the times is like maybe trace it back. Maybe like those movies were so pivotal and changed the game back when they came out in the 70s and 80s. Maybe check out a few things that might have influenced maybe Sean Cunningham from Friday the 13th, or John Carpenter, who created Halloween. Maybe check out some films that might have influenced those guys, and that came maybe 10 years or so before, or even more before those films came out, and trace back the origins of like horror in American cinema. So that's kind of what the focus has kind of been with this channel. It's always been that way, but it's been a little bit. There's been a shift with the show where I'm trying to curate it a little bit more towards that kind of thing. I still cover lots of different things and try to have a lot of variety, but again, it's just that if you like Halloween, well, maybe there's this other movie that came out in like the early '70s or even '60s that came out way before and might have influenced that particular film. So it's always a cool thing. I do that a lot with music. Like I had a friend who turned me on to that. My friend Charlie Hendrick, who also I've talked a lot about on these shows, and he would do that thing too, where like we would talk about music a lot. He turned me on a lot of great music. Used to play in bands with him for a long time. One of the most talented guys I know. And we used to talk about music and film, and he turned me on to so many things. And I remember the one thing that changed for me as far as that, adapting that kind of view for film and music was, I remember one time we were talking about our mutual love for Sonic Youth, one of my favorite rock and roll bands. And he said, "Well, like if you really like these guys, you might like this band." And what that led to is he would tell me and present some bands that were influential on Sonic Youth, like Thurston Moore and Kim Gordon, who were the founders of that band, bands that they grew up listening to in New York during that time in the 70s and 60s even, and stuff that they were listening to, that they were influenced by, that had this, giant influence on creating their own sound. So I started doing that, and I was like, wow, like this opened up a whole nother world of all of this other music that was really, just really open up a whole new world and a whole new world of discovery. And you could and then when I started diving into things that way, kind of across the boards, I started realizing like certain filmmakers, certain bands or artists, it's like, oh, okay, this is kind of where they're getting this idea from, where you could hear the lineage in their sound or their creativity. So it was always a very cool thing. So I've always been, kind of focused on that since that shift for me. So, yeah. So yeah, there's a couple of things. First and foremost, the show today is gonna be focused on this film, this incredible exploitation film, horror exploitation film called Born for Hell. I've never seen it before. It was again a movie I bought totally on a whim. I read some things about it, and it just looked really really great. It was a great price. Got it at Bull Moose, and I just finished it last night. And just an amazing movie. 1975. Just one of the things too. Before I talk about a couple other things, the first initial thing that I felt with this movie was like, wow, like this was 1975, and it's brutal. I mean, it's a super disturbing film, and it's loosely based on a true life serial killer, Richard Speck, who terrorized Chicago in the early 70s. And this movie's pretty graphic, and the graphic nature of it and the rawness of this film is so intense. And there's a couple of scenes of pretty excessive gore that I was just like, wow, taken aback by. And I'm like, wow, like this came out in 75. Like that's just mind-boggling. Like, 40, 46, 47 years ago. Like that's just crazy. But anyway, so I'll be talking about this in a few minutes, but there are a few other things I wanted to actually talk about first. One of the things is kind of sad, I guess, but I just saw yesterday that the Colonial Theater in Belfast has officially closed their doors. They were in the last I think 2 weeks or so, in honor of that, they were showing a whole bunch of free movies where they were showing lots of. They had Alien, and they had I don't know, Star Wars, I think, and a bunch of other movies that were very popular, action movies, family movies, horror movies, whatnot. And they were in honor of for the fans of the theater, they were having all these movies for free. And I was not able to go to it, but now the Colonial Theater is officially closed, unfortunately. So the Colonial Theater has an incredibly long history. Probably, as far as I know, has probably the oldest history as far as being a movie theater around, and that has, for the most part, has stood the test of time with all the different shifts in people's habits, with streaming and how people access media now, and through all the different economic times of where there's a little bit of prosperity, and then the economic hardships that people are going through, which is kind of happening now. But they've maintained this thing for so long, and it's basically like an independent film theater, movie theater. So, they really were able to navigate through lots of changing climates and be pretty successful for a long time. But the thing is that happened. The the owners, Mike Hurley, the owner Mike Hurley was trying to adapt obviously to what's been going on, And like most places, and especially theaters, they were closed. They closed during the pandemic. They were trying, and then they slowly opened up, and then they were trying to, to adapt to things that were going on. And they eventually kind of were back in business over a period of like a year or two after the initial shock of everything that was going on. And it's hard to believe this whole thing has been going on for almost 3 years. But it's been, it's been an experience. So they really shifted their whole mode of operation and what they were doing as far as being a movie theater. And and I think one of the big reasons they obviously closed is I think is it comes down to just lack of people filling the seats at the end of the day. And I think most people are kind of always attributing it to the pandemic still, where people are continually saying, well, people are still not comfortable, and people are coming out now, and people are going to certain things now, obviously a lot more because things have opened and things are in a little bit of a better place, but it's still a factor. But initially, it was such a hit that everybody took and businesses took over those couple of years that was really what ushered in the death of a lot of businesses. And in my humble little opinion, I think it was really in a lot of ways a tiny tiny factor. I think it's an easier thing in some ways to explain why things went awry. And I think it's really, for me, at least in my opinion, the real reason is because people's shifts, their viewing habits and how they access entertainment has completely changed. And that's been going on. I noticed definitely within the last 5 years, 4 to 5 years, I would say 4 years definitely was where things really shifted and changed to and now we're at this completely different place as far as how people want to watch a movie. And I really feel like that is about 90, that's, in a scale from 1 to 100, I would say that's like 97, 98 as far as like how that affected where we're at right now. Because way back when Netflix started the streaming services, they started actually with discs where you could rent movies, but you could rent them in the comfort of your own home and keep movies for a very long time. And then eventually the streaming thing started to where people could, TVs got a little bit better, streaming capabilities got better, and then it became a thing over a couple of years where people could stream TV shows and certain movies, and there was a limited amount of titles. But now it's grown to where you have multiple choices, many choices of many different genres. So it's evolved now to where people can almost to a degree access anything. And then because of the success of Netflix, obviously there's been a plethora of other companies that have started to that came out of that to compete with Netflix. And now it's a common thing now that that's the medium through which people watch content. And I don't know, it's such a weird thing because I feel like on one hand technology, like I think anything, there are good sides, there's positives, and then there's negatives. I think on one hand, the digital age has really helped bring light to, say, films like that I cover, where a lot of these great films, these really obscure films, have gotten a new life, and they're reissued and they're treated with all of this pristine, and they're presented in this pristine glory of getting these Blu-ray releases and 4K releases packed with all these great special features. and then also from a filmmaker's perspective, people who actually who make films, cameras and technology now are so available and relatively cheap that people can create, produce, write, and direct things, almost in the comfort of their own home. Whereas, when things were just at a point where people were only using film, it was impossible and you needed a budget. But now people can make music videos and short clips, short movies, even feature length films for relatively cheap, and and then also try to reach an audience on their own terms, and to a degree even build an audience. So, and then also the idea of being exposed to things that you might not have ever seen. Like certain films or certain bands that have maybe been, or either they were or they are now, but they're in this, and to a degree, a huge amount of obscurity. But now, because of social media and technology, things have less borders in it, and people can come across and have access to things that were once like, maybe, you know, came out initially, but now, and never saw the light of day again. But now they can have a second life because people can share this content, or people can have the exposure through doing something through a search engine. And if you like this kind of video, or like this kind of band, or like this kind of movie, you might get the algorithm thing click in or kick in and suggest something else to you. Or people can just share things, whatever, some obscure movie here, or some obscure band there, or a band that's maybe not very popular, but they can create a channel or create a page or website and or a Facebook page and get all of this exposure for virtually for free. So, in a lot of ways, that side of things is tremendous. And I feel like from a fan of collecting, for a fan like me who loves to collect movies and buy movies, I think from the technological side, it's the best time ever. In a lot of ways, I feel music and movies and basically everything that's related to that. I personally feel like it's the best time it's ever been. And I attribute that to technology because you can share ideas quicker. Things that were in the dark for so long, now they can get some light to them shown on them, and so you can be exposed to all of these things that were, you know, uh, hidden away, and it's so easy. So I feel like, just from the perspective, say, of like buying these movies and collecting them and getting exposed, uh, with just within the last year or so, since I've been increasing my habits of buying films, I have seen more films that I have grown to love, and things that I have never seen or heard about before. And to a degree, also certain bands, the same thing. I mean, so many new bands and artists that I've come across within this year that is staggering, and the quality is just staggering. And again, it's because of having the access of this stuff to your at your fingertips. So, and the fact that all of these movies, getting back to film, the fact that all of these movies are, now getting this incredible treatment, and as a market, and the filmmakers, you know, are actually maybe making a little bit of profit of from these films that were released like 1,000 years ago. So I, when I look at it just at that level, I feel like this is the greatest age ever to be involved with the arts because of that. But on the downside, um, there there are there's because of technology and everything. There's so much content, and so everybody and their grandmother jumps on the bandwagon to kind of enter that arena. So the competition level is so high, and I think financially, there everybody can get a piece of the pie to a degree, like financially, to what's going on, but it's a smaller piece than, say, it was maybe 20 years ago, because people are not spending the money that they once were at one point. I feel like, like when you look at album sales, for instance, movie ticket sales as a whole, they are dramatically have dramatically gone down. And I attribute that all to the streaming thing because of physical copies of albums. Obviously, records, vinyl itself is actually very successful, but it's still nothing compared to say like, even in the '90s when bands would put out albums, it's still incredibly low. And in films also, people are just not spending that amount of money. But to a degree, for artists and independent artists, filmmakers and musicians alike, the le- the the field has leveled out, I think, to a degree. So everybody can get a little bit of a piece of the pie, but it's a lot smaller. And and on the other side of things, the negative side of things is that people are, I think most people are not really wanting that experience of what it is to be in a movie theater, in a dark room with a bunch of strangers and having that kind of ritualistic experience, which is what the filmmakers intended there to be, this like collective group in a dark room experiencing or having this experience with visual and audio, a visual and audio experience where the film can take them out of the mundane for those 2 hours and where you can let it really envelop you. And now it's at a thing now where people, for various reasons, mostly out of convenience and not having to spend that extra dollar, people want to do it, in the privacy of their own home. So that's led to obviously people not going out to see theater to a theater. I mean, I honestly don't know anybody right now, any friends that I have or acquaintances. I don't know anybody that goes to the theater anymore. I have a couple of friends that my friend Emmett Layler. He's going to be on the show. A really great friend of mine, and we play in a couple bands. We're going to actually do a show together. But he's really the only friend that I know that like he's totally into going to the theater, and we'll go to movies. But sometimes we'll corral a few other people to go, but generally we're both like, yeah, let's go to a movie or whatever. And every time, and it's been great, but every time that we go, it's as far as turnout wise, it's pretty dismal. And I don't know, I kind of feel like it's evolved to this thing now where, to a degree, people, like you take Instagram for instance, where it's still predominantly photos, but it's like the idea of like someone can look at a photo of that somebody, maybe somebody was in, say, Italy, or they were somewhere in Europe, and they traveled to these really exotic areas in the country or in the world, and they took these really great photos, and then they posted them, and then they get lots of views, and people comment on it, say how gorgeous it is. And I feel like we're at this point now, to a degree, with our culture where for people to have that experience of like seeing something exotic or traveling somewhere exotic, something that's out of the ordinary, it's almost they almost can just totally have that experience of looking at a photo of, say, somebody took a photo of Venice, Italy, these beautiful photos, and to a degree, it feels like by them looking at those photos, that satisfies that need of travel or seeing something exotic, as opposed to like actually going to Venice, Italy, to actually have that experience and be there. So people are like complacent just to see it from that perspective because it's convenient and it's easy. And it also in the comfort of their own home. And I feel like that's like the analogy. I kind of feel like that's how films are, because that experience of going to a theater in the dark room, the lights go down, and you're in a room with strangers, and you're surrounded by sight and sound, by this beautiful picture and a great sound system, and you're taken out of the mundane experience, that ritualistic experience. That has become that's getting lost, and I feel like it is lost right now because people want to have, to a degree, I think a dumbed down version of that, something that's convenient because they can do it in the convenience of their own house. They can sit on their couch. They can go make a snack. They can go to the bathroom. They can, sit in their pajamas and watch a film. But at the end of the day, the experience of actually what the filmmakers intended is robbed, and it's like 50% of the experience, out of the full 100. And but at the same time, there's no way of really stopping that or really taking hold or taking reign of the tail of technology and, like a cat or something, and kind of pulling it back, or, trying to put it back in the box. Like that's impossible because it's going to keep growing exponentially. And maybe in 10 years, who knows where it will be. But you can't really stop that. And I think with filmmakers and people who love film, but then people who are in the music world and also in the arts, you have to kind of adapt to that anyway. You have to like figure out how you can navigate through that. It's like a band, getting back to the music analogy, like a band could put out an album where there's no budget. They can do it the comfort of the home and actually get a really good sounding recording. But to actually get people to buy your stuff is actually very, very hard. And if you are successful, it is it's very much at a lower rate than say it was 20 years ago. I feel like Bandcamp does a really great job as far as treating their artists really well, and you actually get a higher percentage. But for the most part, it's very, very hard. But at the same time, the artist can also create his own audience and create his own kind of aesthetic and book his own shows and try to create his own reality more so now than ever. But when it comes down to the dollar and cents, it comes back to the bands. They make their money off of the shows and the profits behind that, and people coming out and selling and buying those drinks, or buying that food, or buying that merchandise, or just paying that ticket price. That's where the money is. So you have to figure out a different way aside from just say album sales of how you can do that. And it comes back to full circle because that's to the full circle kind of of the things of where bands that tour a lot are usually making that's where they make their profits. So it's always a funny balance. But when the Colonial Theater, getting back to the Colonial Theater, like when they closed, they opened, and they were in this, it was the worst time in a lot of ways to be a theater. And as far as you're looking at it from a financial perspective, it's the worst time. I think if you look at it from purely a financial perspective for musicians, it's the worst time. It's unprecedented. But there's all these other avenues that you can explore and kind of be successful and make up for that area of where it's kind of in the dark. So it's tricky, but in some ways, I think, like I said, it's better now to a degree in a lot of ways, but it's very tricky and it comes with a cost. But when the Colonial Theater opened up, for years they were a first run movie theater. They would have, like whatever Marvel movie was out, or, big, huge budget, Hollywood films. They would have the first runs of those films on weekends. And then they would have other things. A lot of times they'd show smaller independent films, or art house films, but the focus was on first run films. And my experience, I used to go to the Colonial all the time, and in my history of going to the Colonial, I mean that place was, it was a wonderful time, wonderful place. People would come out left and right, and it would be sold out. I mean, even I remember going at one point. I would go to opening nights a lot of the times, but then because it was so busy, I would go to a lot of the times I'd go to the matinees, and even that would be really busy. You'd sometimes have to get to the theater early because sometimes there would be a chance at the theater that it could be sold out even during a matinee, and it was a really great time. But it was really that experience, and I have so many great memories, like particularly around like waiting in line to see the Star Wars movies, or waiting in line, and especially like when the Lord of the Rings movies came out, the first three, like waiting in line to see those, and just that anticipation and waiting in line with other people that were really excited and buzzed about seeing that particular film. And it was a magical experience, and then you'd go into that room and watch the film together, and it was just like a truly magical experience. And I had, overall, like the best experiences going to see film there. And when they opened up again, they really shifted things. They stopped doing first run films, which took me a long time to understand why that happened, but they stopped showing. And there's been, this coming out of the summertime, in springtime and summertime typically is when, Hollywood puts out tons of films. Like that's their summer season. So for big budget films, it's the biggest time of year, you know, coming out of winter all the way to August. And but I noticed they stopped showing first run films, and then they got into the series of where they were basically, it's a beautiful theater. They have this theater called the Dreamland, which actually has a stage, and you go down these steps, and it's just got it's got amazing acoustics, and it's a beautiful like theater itself. They started changing it up to where they were having music certain nights of the week. They were having bands play, like acoustic Maracana kinds of things on Saturdays. And then they were also doing a comedy night. They were also, and then the other thing they started getting into is there were various people, you know, they'd have authors come who would come out with a book about, about a certain poet or some kind of environmental issue or what have you. Mostly like dealing with nonfiction issues. They would have like an author come who had written this book and give a talk. And then as far as films go, they would show older films. Like they had shown one of the movies I saw there was The Godfather and Casablanca, and they basically would show these classic films. But they would do that. They would show them only like a couple times a week. It was a very short period of time, and they were they were all free, which was cool. And I went there twice since I've only been there twice in the last, geez, almost 3 years, which is crazy. I used to go there all the time, all the time. I remember like I had a good friend, my good friend Zafar Wickham. He lives in Belfast, and he's also way into movies too. And we used to go there all the time to see movies. And but on one hand, I didn't go because of my job schedule, and my overall schedule changed a lot, so I wasn't able to go there. But then it was also a point of where they were showing films that were like really only in this like limited release capacity, so you only had very limited time to see them, and they were also not showing any new movies. Um, One of the coolest experiences I had with the Colonial was, I remember one of my all-time favorite movies is Apocalypse Now, and about maybe 10 years ago or so they re-released it. Francis Ford Coppola, the director, re-released it and added these extra scenes, the Redux, and they had it at the Colonial. And I remember I had already seen that movie a bunch of times. It's one of my all-time favorites. But when they re-released it, the Redux, they had it at the Colonial, and it was one of the greatest movie going experiences I ever had. I mean, because one of the cool things is they actually showed the film, the original film of the movie. So the color and the sound was just unbelievable. But it was the actual film, and they went that extra mile to present it in its real, in the way you should see a film like that. So it was amazing. So when I saw that they were doing showing a Godfather, and this was like over the summertime, early in the summer. The Godfather is pretty much my all-time favorite movie, so I've seen that movie, I don't know, 2 billion times. But I was like, oh, I got to go see it, you know. So I was expecting that it would be that kind of experience, and it was actually terrible. I went to the theater. There was only like 10 people in the theater. It was really strange. I went to the theater and it was like 10 people in the theater. And Mike Hurley came out and did a little talk about the film, a little bit of the history. And and it was funny because there was only like maybe 3 people in the film that or in the seats that had actually seen the film. Most of the people there had never seen The Godfather, so it was just like, wow. And they weren't like, you know, I can understand if it was like maybe teenagers or like people in their 20s. But these were like older people my age or even older that had never seen it. And I'm just like, wow, like how can you not see like The Godfather? Um, it's like I don't know how can I equate it to. It's like saying you like I don't know your your favorite kind of music is rock and roll, but somebody asks you, do you like Led Zeppelin, and you have no idea who Led Zeppelin is, and it's like really, or Black Sabbath. It's like to me it's that kind of thing. But anyway, so they showed the film, and I realized the sound, the quality of the video was pretty awful. I watched the whole film because I just love it so much, and I get wherever I see it, I get glued to it, and I have to end up watching it. I can't walk out of it or turn it off. I've always had that experience with that movie. That's why it's my favorite film. It just sucks me in no matter what. So I end up watching it. It's like 3 hours, 3.5 hours long, and but the quality of the film was terrible. And then I realized and found out that the video, well, actually, what they were showing was more or less like this Blu-ray kind of digital version of the film that they get, and it's I can't exactly remember what it was actually called, but it's basically like more or less maybe a higher quality version of a Blu-ray than you say. Like if you went to the store or video store and you rented a copy of a Blu-ray, or you bought a copy of the Blu-ray of The Godfather, you know the quality would be pretty good if you watched it on a pretty good TV. But they have for the theaters for when they do a lot of older films and they show classics. I think they have this other version of that where there's like they get a package from the company that they get these movies from, and they're a little bit more it's upgraded a little bit more to the degree for like the ratio and the width of the screen and the sound, so it's a little bit of a better quality. But I thought it looked terrible. It like came across to me as like basically they went and they just took a a DVD copy or a Blu-ray copy and just threw it in, and you watch the film, because to me it just doesn't transfer, because you have this giant screen and you have this really great sound system, but it's not meant for that format. That format's meant for either something that's totally made digitally, that's like a real contemporary film, or something where it needs to be shown. They need to show the film, so the quality was terrible. And I noticed, and basically I came around feeling like kind of cheated. It was a free show, but I kind of felt cheated, and I kind of felt like they didn't go that extra mile. And it was like I can watch it at home and get a much better quality. I only have it on DVD, and the quality is way better because the ratio just isn't there. And it was disappointing. Granted, it was for free, but and I just came away from this whole thing of that they were showing all these movies just to throw them out there, and they were basically just DVD, Blu-ray copies, or even burnt copies of movies, and they were just kind of showing them on their screen, and I just felt like uh, the quality was terrible. Like, so it was disappointing. And and then so I just kind of stopped going, and I just, a lot of it had to do with the timing of things and my schedule, but I was just kind of disappointed by that move. They didn't go that extra mile, and I kind of feel like I think it was great and awesome that they were trying all these new things and trying to like because people weren't going there, and but they were trying all these new things, and I think it was a wonderful theater. Mike Hurley's an amazing guy, but in my own honest opinion, I feel like they just made some bad choices. People weren't going there, I think, at the end of the day because it just wasn't a movie theater anymore. People were not going there to see. Like I remember even on their Facebook page, I had the Batman had just come out with Robert Patterson, and that was a huge movie for the summer, and it's such an awesome movie, especially something to see on the big screen. But they weren't getting that movie, and I was just like, this movie is like one of the most anticipated movies uh, in general, and especially this season. And I'm like, why are they not like that's guaranteed? That's a guaranteed huge weekend for this theater. And I'm just like, why are they not why are they not getting this film? It just didn't make any sense. And they had said that it was because well, people are not coming out to the theater, and there's still this. They were their response. I remember getting in a dialogue with the theater on their page, and their responses they were mostly attributing it to well, people don't really want to come out so much now because they're afraid of the pandemic and getting sick and all this stuff. And I was like, well, I that's a factor, but I at the end of the day, I didn't think that's what was going on at all. It's like every other theater that had that film and that film set records. It made you know almost more money than any other Batman film, even including the Christopher Nolan films. This is during a pandemic. So I kind of feel like that's not really true. I feel like they dropped the ball, and they did that with a bunch of other films, and then and at the end of the day, I think it's great that because it's a beautiful theater, and they want to change up things and try new things, having music, having comedy night. But for me, it's like I want to go to the Colonial Theater to see a movie. I don't really want to go there to see a comedy group or to see an Americana bluegrass band play. I can do that other places, but to me, Colonial Theater is a movie theater, and it's like that's what I want to do. I want to go to a movie theater, and I understand that like places need to adapt and everything, but I really feel like they changed. They changed significantly so much within the last couple of years, to where it wasn't even really regarded or recognized as a movie theater, and I thought that was disappointing. I think they underestimated that if they kept that momentum, at least tried that momentum, I think they underestimated the public that people, at least locally, would probably still support it, because we have a great community, and I think people would have still supported it if they didn't shift things so much, and suddenly it was a movie theater, but not really anymore, you know, but without being disrespectful to them, this is just my own, dumb opinion, and that's all that matters. But, and so it was a strange thing. And the other interesting thing that kind of irks me sometimes is like, and it was a while back when I went there to see The Godfather. And I think I saw Cinema Paradiso, which is an old Italian movie. I just went there with another friend, and and that's a classic. It won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Film, I believe, in like the 80s. And it's a, beautiful film. But again, I went with a friend. They had a free showing, and I was on a Saturday night in the middle of winter, and the quality was terrible. I thought the video, the the it was the same experience of going to the theater and just basically, I remember a long time ago I went to this theater at Flagship, and they were doing free showings of films. This was a long time ago, and they were showing films like The Shining and Dances with Wolves, and I went to see them, and it was terrible because basically it was just like they threw in a Blu-ray or DVD copy of it, and it would be projected on the screen. It's like that's not the right, that's not at all the right ratio of how you can watch a film on the big screen. Like the DVD is formatted differently than what you would see on a big screen, so it doesn't. The ratio is off. and the pixels all off. And that was like, this was better quality, but it was still that same kind of thing. And it was like really like, I kind of wish I just didn't go. I could have watched it on home. I could have watched it at home. But the other thing too that always irks me is like the last few weeks, because they just closed. And again, I'd been there a couple times, and I've been going to the theater a lot down in Flagship. And most of the time, whenever I've gone to any of these shows, about 95% of the time, there's like nobody in the theater. Nobody. I'm like literally, I have the theater to myself. And I've seen some really great movies this year. And new movies. But it's been, as far as the turnout wise, it's really dismal. It's really dismal. and and when I was reading about them just recently opening, or actually doing these free showings at the Colonial, they were talking about the last few days. Every theater was filled up. Every theater was filled up, and you couldn't even some. I guess some of them, some of the showings of these free movies that they're doing, and they were showing like, I think like 20 different films, a whole bunch of movies. Some of the showings I think were sold out, like, or not sold out, but you couldn't get in, and it was just filled up to capacity. And then the last show I guess that they had was so packed it was standing room only. The very last movie that they showed, and I'm always amazed by that, uh, because I think we're all guilty of it, but I have my reasons as to why I don't go there and why I couldn't go there and why I kind of stopped going, which I kind of explained for what it's worth. But uh, and you know, people were crying and people were emotional because this was the last night that they're open and this whole thing. And but my first reaction is like, why weren't all of these people coming out before that? Why are they just coming out on the closing day? It's like that always happens when the business is going out of business, or they announce they're going to be going out of business. The last week that they're open, they can't keep up with the customers. In like the last 5 days, the place is packed. But it's like, why weren't these people there before when they were needed? You know, it just drives me crazy. It's kind of this hypocritical thing then, and I think it's how we are as creatures. I don't know what it is. It's a weird thing. But my first reaction was like, that's great and everything, but why, if these people were so upset and outraged and saddened by this, which it is, why weren't, when it was in January, February, or all throughout the summer, why weren't they showing up like this? Because then they wouldn't be closing. But anyway, but on some better news, or, more positive news, I really want to thank, we just did a show with Quantum at Ada's. And it was a really awesome, fun experience. And I, was really happy that the folks at Ada's are really, really great. And I was really surprised that they were willing to try out something new and a little bit weird, something kind of, out of the box, because they have a lot of music there now. They've been doing lots of music at Ada's in Rockland for the last couple of years, and they've kind of shifted, I think, this past year into trying to make it more of a regular thing. They actually have even a stage now, and so they've tried to push it a little bit more. And I've seen music there quite a few times, and I got a chance to play there a couple of times, or a handful of times over the last few years. And I've noticed the last few years, like, they've kind of tried to make that a little bit more of a focus with having live music. And so I proposed this idea of doing something where maybe we could do a show where there'd be like 3 different electronic artists, and like try to bill it as like a dance party, but the main thing would be focused on, the 3 groups that would be playing, or 3 bands or 3 artists that would be playing all original music, and it's not going to be DJs. DJing is great and it's awesome, and that would be great to have that as a part of it at some point, where somebody could play a lot of great records or albums or songs. But I kind of wanted this focus to be where it was all original music, but it could still be very dance oriented. But I wanted it to be showcased on artists presenting their own material, whether you liked it or not. You know, you might really dig it, you might not. It might be a little bit fringe or whatever. But I had three great artists, two great friends that played, and one guy, Spencer Roulard, who I just actually met recently. He did this incredible modular set. He opened up things with like this really great kind of ambient, chill, modular stuff, and it was awesome. I was like, it was perfect because when we started the whole show, there was still a lot of people eating dinner, so we had to like kind of watch the volume and not to go too crazy too early. But he was perfect. He was like totally read the crowd. He did this whole like amazing set of just really great music, and it was super cool. And I really want to do another show with him really soon because I was really impressed with it. And also, my friend Eric Halsey did his or had his debut as with his material, and that was super great. It was super funky, like kind of hip hop inspired. A lot of this stuff kind of reminded me of like kind of like trap kind of stuff, like a kind of a subgenre of hip hop, very electro, a lot of bass. He played live bass, and he had these really cool old funky keyboards, and he just looped all this stuff. But it was great. It was super cool, and he played like an hour of just all of this, kind of original stuff that he had composed and written, and it was like this real hip hop, trap music infused kind of thing, very electro, all instrumental too. That's the other thing that those guys were doing was all like it was all original music. But it was great. And then and then we did our set. We did a quantum set, and it was super fun. And it was great. I was really psyched that a lot of people came out to the show. People were really supportive of it, and I thought it was cool because maybe some people were expecting to like have like a DJ there, and which could have been cool, like, but like have a DJ or have a couple of DJs, and one guy is like playing all hip hop stuff, stuff that's maybe more popular or similar to what people are accustomed to listening to, or the same thing with like a DJ, have a house music DJ where they play like music that's other essentially other people's music, maybe a little bit of your own, but it's essentially other people's music, and trying to just pump the dance floor up with energy, and which would be great. But I didn't really want to do that with the show. I wanted to do it so the focus would still be three different artists doing all original material, but trying to still go for that same kind of energy. So I was super psyched that like it seemed like it was a big success. Everybody was super excited with the whole show, and everybody seemed really happy with it. Went, and it was a lot of work promoting the show because we only had a week and a half or 2 weeks. It was kind of a relatively last minute show, so there was a lot of work in promoting it. But Ada's did a fantastic job promoting the show, and I did a lot of work on my own, and everybody else that was involved with the show did a lot of work putting it together. And it was a 3 hour show, and every group pretty much played roughly an hour. So we had plenty of music, and there was enough time in between the sets that we could have the changeover. It just worked out really well. So looking forward to doing it again. It will definitely be something that we'll do it again, and maybe we'll see what happens. Like turn it into some kind of a series, like a bi-monthly thing, or because I think I think people are interested in having something that's a little bit different, but can be dance music, and that might be more centered on like artists putting out original music and not just doing the DJ thing. Although that's awesome and fun, and I'm a huge fan, and I miss going to see DJs. But the focus is going to be on original material. So I was really, really psyched, and thanks for everyone for coming out. It was a blast, and the energy was great. And so like the next show coming up is going to be this Sunday. It's going to be our last show at Lulu's, and with Quantum, and we'll be playing this Sunday from 3 to 6, and it will be our last show for the season. We'll squeeze in one more, but it's probably getting too cold, and it's going to be this Sunday at Lulu's on Oak Street in Rockland, 3 to 6. So I think what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to get my friend Mike to bring his. He's got some nice recording gear, so I'm going to get him because it will probably be our last show there. I kind of wanted to mark the occasion that maybe we can record the whole show just as a memento or whatever at the end of a kind of a pretty awesome season. So I think we're going to get I'm going to do that and try to make that a thing to maybe attract maybe a few extra people to it. And so that'll be this Sunday, so I'm excited about that. And then October 1st, that will be another bigger event where, well, again, it'll be me and my friend Halsey. And we'll be playing this outdoor party right next to River Ducks in Camden on October 1st at 2 o'clock. And it's going to be outside. It's going to basically be like an outdoor kind of party where we'll be playing, and we'll probably be asking a little bit for a donation, but the show itself, the party itself is free. And we'll be playing like a couple of sets of music throughout the afternoon. And so that'll be super fun. So yeah, and there's been promotion for that, and there's going to be even more promotion coming up for both shows. So check it out. So this brings me to the cover of this, the topic, the main focus. So this is a movie, again, I had never seen before. It's called Born for Hell. It was directed by Matthew Cartery. It's a French name. I'm sorry, I'm butchering these names. It stars Matthew Carey, and it was directed by Chris Horrocks. It came out in 1975, which is just wild. And it's basically a Canadian film. And it came out in 1975, like I said, and it's basically based on the Richard Speck murders, who was a serial killer, and what a monster. He basically was this maniac who basically held captive 8 different women, these nurses, and he held them captive in their house or in this building, and he basically killed all of them, tortured them, and just awful. One of them was able to escape, and and she survived, and she was able to identify him. And man, this movie, what an incredible movie though. It's what an incredible movie. It's like Matthew Carrier, who is a French Canadian actor. I never heard of him or had seen him before. I never heard of this director, Dennis Hurok, either. Hurdux. But what an incredible movie. It's definitely like this really, it's definitely low budget. It's super dirty. Like, it's really raw. Like this, it's definitely a horror exploitation movie. But it's also, kind of based on real accounts and it reminds me a lot of The Last House on the Left, which was the first Wes Craven movie, which is like one of the most low down, dirty movies ever made as far as a horror film, like kind of exploitation. And this has that vibe. I mean, but it's really great. The acting is just really great, and the whole sense that you get from what's going on in the development of the characters and the chemistry that these women have together, because they're all friends, they're all they're all nurses at this hospital. They all are friends. They some of them, I think, even kind of live together. They're really close friends. And Richard Speck, he is such a maniac in this, but it's such a great kind of character study. Like the first hour, 45 minutes, you're kind of basically getting this information of like who these characters are, and kind of the location, what they're going through in their daily lives. And then the last like 35 minutes or 40 minutes of the film is just like kind of hell on earth. Yeah, it's hard to believe. And I got this on Blu-ray, and I picked this up at Bull Moose, surprise, surprise. But it's an amazing film. I was like, from a technical side, like I said, it's pretty low budget. I definitely consider this like a pretty grimy kind of exploitation movie, but and it's really well done. Great acting. It's very suspenseful. It's super messed up. The ending is totally messed up. There's a couple of scenes in this film where it is pretty gory and really graphic. And I remember I watched this last night for the first time, and I was just like, holy mackerel! Like it was like, a couple of scenes that were just totally shocking, and I'm like, wow, like this came out in 1975, and it was just like, wow, talk about ahead of its time and pushing the envelope. Like even now, I think if this film came out, it would be like, it would be controversial, because there's times they obviously don't show a lot of the scenes, but there are a few scenes where they show things that are happening, and it's pretty heinous. But at the same time, it's a really great movie. Like you really do care about the characters because the writing is so great, the acting is great, and it more or less takes place in this one centralized location. So, uh, but it's super gritty and super raw, and it's got some really great special features on it. I just started watching those after I finished the film last night, and yeah, it's super interesting, super interesting. There's a really great interview with the lead actor, Matthew Curry, forgive my, I'm totally butchering his name, but he was talking about how he was in a film uh, earlier in his career where he was in a film with Orson Welles, and it's super interesting. He was talking about how like that was he always looks back at that experience as like his highlight, working with like the legendary Orson Welles, which is like one of the gods in cinema, one of the greatest figures ever. And he was talking about how impossible Orson Welles was to work with, and it was like towards the end of his career because Orson Welles had put on a lot of weight and he was drinking a lot, and he was like just constantly irritable and really hard to deal with and super eccentric. And he was saying like on set when they were filming, uh, he would like he would drink like five five full bottles of wine every day on the set, and then he would get so drunk and inebriated that he wouldn't get out. He would sit in the couch or a chair or this bed where some of the scenes would be taking place, and he would just refuse to leave. So they would have to like shoot his scene with him in the bed because he would be so drunk and would not refuse to get out. He would refuse to move. That he was like next to impossible, and just wild stuff. But great, amazing film. So yeah, Born for Hell, 1975. Definitely a really great addition to my Blu-ray collection. And again, a movie I've not seen. I took a chance on it, and awesome film, awesome film. So thanks again. This is Jason Dean from Film Fanatic, and we will see you next time. If you get a chance, like and subscribe to my video channel on YouTube. All right, take it easy, guys. Bye.